All right, welcome back everyone to George James and Associates Research Tools channel. Today I'm going to record a series of videos in probably 10-minute increments is what I'm going to aim for. And each of these is going to form a series that is what to do in writing a follow-up paper. So you've already written a paper, and ideally you have already published said paper. And so how do you write a follow-up to your own study? And so that this is my goal. And basically what we're going to do is put together a paper. And so this is the one that was published, I think it was November of last year, October of last year. And it's my fixed income fraud shock paper. And so here we have the abstract. You can see this is the actual paper that you can download. It's open access, so anybody can download and read it. And it's in the Journal of Risk and Financial Management. And so we see that we have an abstract keywords. That's pretty typical of a journal. And then introduction, literature review, and then within literature review, we have subsections, right? So retirement planning, and then impact of fraud on retirement outcomes, shocks, uncertainty, fixed income. So there's a lot. And then we arrive at theoretical framework, and inside this we have the Trinity studies, fraud damages, health and retirement study. And then we move to method and results. So in APA 7th edition, these are separate sections, but for this journal, right, the journal that you publish in is going to arrange your paper however it wants. So in accordance with the journal's style. So we have method and results, and then data methodology, right? These are my little list of tables that I have here, and then it's going to just go through hypotheses. And then the results, right? And so these are the tables. I don't know if you've seen these or not, but this is the 4-dimensional model. My contribution is the green and red numbers inside of it. And so we have no fraud table, best, random fraud, and then we have the worst case scenario, and then we have serial fraud at the end, yeah, which is all red. So there's no success in serial fraud, not surprisingly. And then within the, let's see, is it results? Yeah, then conclusions. So within conclusions, we then have limitations. We have like a couple of paragraphs of write-up, and then limitations, implications, and future research. And then that should be the end. Yeah, then the references. So that's it. All right. So this is what it looked like when I submitted it to the journal. So before we changed everything around to match the journal style. So this is APA 7th, I think it's APA 7th. So running head, page number, the actual title, and then abstract, and then, right, this is more the introduction, then literature review, and so on. So you see it's very similar. And so now the question is, how do we import, like, can we scavenge some things with this paper in writing our own follow-up? So one of the things I tell students to do is when they're looking at even their own work, you want to go back and revisit the future, future research, right? So there are a multitude of avenues for future research. One is investigating the interaction between financial literacy and fraud to discern whether lower levels. Okay, we're not doing that in this paper, but that is an important one. Another avenue would be to question the veracity of respondent fraud claims, to mirror account statements whereby members of the control group experience no fraud and participants in the treatment group. I actually did that in one of my dissertation essays. So I will be publishing that at some point, hopefully. And so I will draw on this paper as, I'll reference this paper because it does talk about that. And then conduct withdrawal rate and time horizon between fixed income and heavy portfolio allocation. So I didn't do any of these things, but what I am going to do, I'm just making sure there's nothing else in here. Okay, so what I'm going to do in the second paper, the follow-up paper, which looks like this, is I'm going to, so what I did is I copied this paper over and then just gutted the initial paper because I want to keep the same APA 7th. So I only ever wrote one single paper in APA, and then I copied that paper because I don't want to have to redo all of the, and this is even without the APA 7th edition title page, because normally there's a title page and there's the whole thing. But I only ever wrote one paper and then I just copy it over because it becomes my template. And then I just change the content as needed. So rather than reinventing the wheel, it saves me a lot of time. Okay, so what I'm doing in this paper then is I'm looking to see if we instead use monthly S&P 500 and intermediate term government bond data instead of annual returns, we're going to use monthly returns. And from a different source, are we going to arrive at the exact same results, which, to go back, come on, computer. Okay, so my computer's just going to be dumb. That's fine. The key results here were specifically, so I go through all my tables, and then what I did is I looked at the difference across asset allocations. Yeah, I looked at the differences. Right, I put all this stuff in there. But my main finding, where is it? It's the 2.89%. Sorry, I'm just having to find out where this thing, there we go, 2.86%. Okay. When average, the total average diminished access rate to a retiree's portfolio, success rate, sorry, to a retiree's portfolio is 2.86%. So this is the key number here. And this is the asset allocation and the differences. And so when I use my monthly data, I think instead of 2.86, it's like 2.83. So at least it's in the correct direction. It's just, there's no practical significance there, right? Like if you tell someone, oh, good news, I reduced your chances, or I reduced the damage from 2.86 to 2.83. They're gonna give you some funny look because you didn't really do that much. I mean, it is a difference, but it's not enough to be practical. So, all right. So I always do the abstract last, and then I already started working on the literature review. Unfortunately, you can't copy over the same literature review. So I've got to go find some sources. But I did start here. So retirement success is commonly equated with minimizing longevity risk. I'm going to put a source in there because what we're talking about is at the end of your retirement, when you die, which is the end of your retirement, do you still have money left in your accounts or not? And if you do, then that was a successful retirement from longevity risks perspective. And if you ran out of money before you died, that was an unsuccessful retirement. And so then the question is, what are the probabilities, right? What's the probability that you will have a successful versus an unsuccessful retirement? And that's what I looked at. That's what these green and red numbers are. So with all these combinations, right? 3% withdrawal rate, 100% equity for 15 years retirement window. Excuse me. There's a 100% chance of success versus if it's 6% withdrawal rate with a 75-25 for 15 years, it's 89%. And the magic number here is 90 and above. 90 and above is green, which means success. And that is arbitrary to a certain extent. Didn't mean to do that. Okay. So anyway, that's what we're looking at. I'm not sure really what to do with this. I think this is going to get slashed, but I do bring up Robert Shiller, and he's the same source for the data that I'm going to use in this study. Theoretical framework. So this is my theoretical framework is my own paper. So this is the 2021 paper right here that I just walked you through. So this is the Lee 2021 paper, which is going to be my theoretical framework. So I'm going to talk all about that paper. And I'm going to spend, 2, 3, maybe 4 paragraphs on this. And then I already wrote the methods section. So methods is data and methodology. And so here, I've already reformulated this. I don't know if this is supposed to be one word in the SPVI, but anyway, it doesn't matter. So yeah, here we go. So by contrast, we're in this study, we're using Nobel laureate Robert Shiller's monthly US stock market 1871 to the present and CAPE ratio data. So we're using different data, and it's nice because we do arrive at pretty much the same conclusion, as I said. And then methodology. So here is different because we looked at, we also made it more robust than the initial study because we're looking at no fraud versus fraud. That's what the NFs and Fs are for. In DNI, that's no dividends reinvested and no inflation. Whereas in DNI is dividends reinvested, no inflation. And then NDI is no dividends reinvested, but accounts for inflation. And then DI is both dividends reinvested and inflation. And then these are the same, right? They're dual pairing. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 for those different combinations across when there's no fraud versus when there is fraud. That's what the NF and the F stand for. All right. And then yeah, so I've already done the methodology here, and I did talk about my paper a little bit. So I mentioned the differences, and there are some places where I put source right here because I do need to find out. I need to go find a source that says this. These are the things that after you've been researching for a while, you know that somewhere someone said this. You just have to go find it. It's not like I'm making stuff up. So, okay. And then hypotheses, I did change these around. So there's no practical difference between the Ipsen data and the Shiller data. Whereas here, you would think that the Shiller data will yield practically greater portfolio success rates, which is expressed in the lower average difference, right, between fraud and no fraud. So better results. Problem is, yes, technically they were lower results, but I don't think they were practically significant. So I'm basically going to say in the results that my hypothesis was partially supported. There is a reduction in difference, so 2.86 to 2.83, but it's not enough, right? I mean, if you round, it's going to be rounded up to 2.9 or 3. Well, no, they'd both be rounded up to 3 if it was rounded to the nearest whole percentage. But yeah, rounded up to 2.9 instead of 2.8. For most people, that's not going to be significant. So, and then here I need to just import. I do need to change this data out. So these are actually, let me go ahead and do that because I do need to. Yeah, and this is going to look very different as well because I'm going to need more I'm going to need like double the. Well, I'm going to need. I don't know if it's double, but I'm going to need different tables. Different number of tables, I think. Right, because in this case, I also didn't do best. I didn't do the best case scenario, the worst case scenario, and so on. I didn't do all of that, but instead, I just randomized. I did no fraud across the different assumptions, and then I did fraud across the different assumptions, and they were all randomized. It was random fraud. So that's what I care about, is the random fraud. The no fraud is the baseline, and then the random fraud is the difference. And here, this is going to change as well. So yeah, so I have all this stuff. This entire table, I may junk this completely because this isn't, or I may it's going to simplify. Because again, I didn't do a best case and a worst case in the follow-up study. I just did no fraud and then fraud, which is randomized. So the no fraud and fraud is, let me explain that really quickly. So you see over here, I did like worst case scenario, and then I did random, and then I did best, and then I did no fraud, right? Yeah, no fraud. And so what that means is that if it's the best case scenario, then that means that it was only 3% fraud, and it didn't happen until year 15 because that's further away from retirement. Because of retirement, because of sequence of returns risk, any subtraction from your account value when it's the greatest amount, if it's multiplicative, if it's a percentage, is going to have far more detrimental effects than if it happens later when you have a lower account balance. And then in terms of time horizon, so it could this isn't the no fraud, sorry. The best case scenario is going to be 3% at year 15. The worst case scenario, though, the worst case scenario is going to be 10% at year 1. Now you may say, well, year 1 isn't even on here. It's for 15 to 40. Correct. So fraud can happen at any point in your retirement. And so if it happens at year 1, that's really bad. And then if it's 10%, it's really, really critically bad, right? So that's why the numbers for the worst case, I'd have to bring them back up here. But the numbers for the worst case were pretty bad, much worse than the random or the best case. And so random then just randomly selects a magnitude 3 to 10%, and it randomly selects a year 1 to 15. The reason why 15 is the last year, because if it's any later than that, let's say that I did somewhere between year 1 and year 40. Well, if the fraud didn't happen until year 37, then all these people, even when fraud was supposed to be modeled, wouldn't be modeled because they retired and died before the fraud happened. So that doesn't make any sense. So, all right, we're now at the 15 minute mark. And so I'm going to go look for some more sources, and then I'm going to plug that stuff in and come back here. And then and then the third video is going to be just the references section.